You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. People in Baton Rouge are obviously not very excited about this game. That goes without saying. What is the general feeling there in Alabama?
It's pretty much the same. I think some local media in the state have tried to bring up the comments Orgeron made in the past, and the whole 2019 was the first time Alabama had lost at home in however many years it's been or whatever. But at the end of the day, I mean, they see the point spread, they see the writing on the wall, and the anarchy that is LSU football right now. So I don't think people are anticipating much of a matchup here.
Mark, is there anything? We'll talk about Alabama specifically here in a bit, learn a bit more about the team, aside from just what we've seen outside looking in. But is there anything about this matchup that you look at and you go, well, that part could be interesting?
No, not really. I got to be honest. I mean, you've seen this LSU team more than I have. It's just not going to work. And the funny thing about this, Matt, is Alabama. I mean, I think the general consensus here is this Alabama team just isn't as good as it's been in the past. And a lot of folks, or at least I could say, I was a little surprised. Not that they were number 2 in the CFP this week, but the comment was made that there was such a divide between 2 and everybody else. And whether it's fair or not, Alabama tends to get judged against Alabama. And I don't know if that's kind of an elitist thing or a pretentious type of thing, but that's just how it goes. And these days, they just there's something missing. They're not clicking like they've like you've done in past years. With all that said, I don't see any breakdown here at position by position where LSU has a decided advantage over Alabama.
So how did Florida manage to be in a 4-quarter game with this team?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It goes back to there are a couple of issues, right? The most pressing from that Florida game in talking to people was the issue at middle linebacker specifically. And we were getting a lot of information about guys just kind of freelancing and not being where they're supposed to be and trying to make plays but not playing within whatever scheme they're in. And the middle of the field was just left wide open. And similar to that, against Tennessee, there were issues in the secondary. So the 4- and 5-star recruits, Matt, are still there, and there are a whole bunch of them. But I don't know if they're not committed. I don't know if they're not experienced enough. Nick Saban has talked a lot about trying to make sure that this team was focused. He's tried to get that message to his guys a lot. There's something different about this locker room. They're just not. They're not dialed in.
You got a comp for an Alabama team that going into November, was where this team is, but isn't, dialed in, that maybe turned it on late?
I think you'd have to go back to one of those A.J. McCarron type deals, where they wound up going to the Sugar Bowl and losing that year when they didn't get into the postseason or the national championship picture. I think you'd have to go back pretty far. That's a testament to Nick Saban, right? The fact that he can keep these guys as dialed in as he has over the years. But at some point, when you have this turnover in starters and guys going to the NFL and guys leaving early and your coaching and your coordinators keep turning over, there's got to be a point that you take a step back, however brief or however slight, and maybe potentially this is it. With that said, I mean, here we are in November, and they're number 2 in the CFP, and control their destiny and all that good stuff.
Mark Heim's with us. He's on Twitter at Mark_Heim, WNSP Radio in Mobile. So let's talk a little bit about the Tide. Bryce Young obviously was a big storyline coming in, replacing Mac Jones. How's Bryce Young looked so far through 8 games?
I think for the most part, people are pleased. Early on, there was a lot of talk that he won't run, right? I mean, it was either he's got his eyes downfield and he's constantly trying to extend a play, but he's not willing to run till he's just not a running quarterback. And then what you saw in the last couple of weeks, it's almost like he's making a conscious effort to run. So when he runs, Matt, it's not just taking what the defense gives him. He's making guys miss now. I mean, he almost looks like Jalen Hurts out there kind of running around. So from that perspective, I think people are thrilled. Now, with that, and we're nitpicking again here, I mean, like it's thin. I mean, it's a Matt Moscona hair thin, right? What we're talking about now is he's
Oh,
missing
come
on
on,
throws.
bro. What is that?
He's missing on some throws that Alabama fans consider routine now. But you look at the quarterbacks that have come through this system, right? So there were a couple of passes where he had an open receiver where he just kind of missed. And so I don't know if he's been as sharp late in the season as he's been early in the season, but he's kind of made up for that with that ability to run. And so overall, I mean, certainly you'd give him an A. He's still a Heisman contender and all that kind of stuff. But again, it's another young guy, and at Alabama, you put so much pressure on these guys to not only start, but to start so early in their careers. But I think he's developed, and I think he's got a pretty good grasp of what they're trying to do. They're not as explosive as they were a year ago, obviously, but they certainly got the weapons to be.
They're not as explosive, yet they're averaging 46 points a game. It's such an Alabama problem, man. Let's talk about some of the playmakers. Brian Robinson's there. He'll rush for 1,000 yards this year. Maybe not the biggest name there among receivers. What's the players that we need to look out for on Saturday?
Well, Brian Robinson's one of the. I think one of my colleagues over at AL.com figured out. I think he was like one of 19 players who will be on the field or on the sideline or whatever Saturday who was on the roster when 2 years ago in 19 when LSU came to town last. So he's one of those guys that remembers Orgeron's comments, and he's made mention of that and he felt disrespected and all that. So he really came out and played good ball all year. He's real tough. He's had to carry a lot more of the load because of some injuries at running back throughout the course of the year, but he's just been incredibly dynamic. He's just the latest in a long line of great running backs. When you look at receiver, everybody kind of thought John Mechie was going to be the next guy up, right? Devontae Smith's gone, Ruggs to the NFL. You go through the list of guys. But Mechie, he hasn't really been that guy. He hasn't been bad, but he just hasn't stood out. The Ohio State transfer, Jameson Williams, I mean, he's been unbelievable. And of course, they're just loaded at tight end. So when they feature that tight end, they're just such a mismatch for defenders. Just big, strong, athletic basketball type guys. So again, they have weapons, and I guess again we're nitpicking, right, Matt, because it just doesn't feel like it's clicking on all cylinders. But those are some of the guys I would keep an eye on.
Mark, any weakness on the offensive side?
No, I mean, unless you're talking about facing Georgia in a defense of that caliber, right. We haven't seen it. I think they've had some penalties early in the season. They were getting behind the chains early. I mean, the weaknesses are self-inflicted, right? Against Tennessee, they only had 4 penalties. It was the fewest all season, but they dropped 3 balls. They lost a fumble, and they got a punt block, right? And then all the defensively, the TDs that Tennessee had were all because of mistakes by Alabama. So again, they're not any weaknesses per se, but anytime these self-inflicted wounds come up and they come up in batches, I mean, it's concerning to a lot of folks.
He's on Twitter at Mark_Heim, WNSP Radio in Mobile, AL.com. Let's flip it over, Mark. Talk about the defensive side of the ball. The pass rush gets a ton of attention. I'll ask the same question on the defensive side that I just asked offensively. Any weaknesses on that side of the ball?
Well, I just got finished talking about the secondary. The secondary just left people baffled after the whole Tennessee thing, right? So there's some young guys, some very talented guys back there, but they're all incredibly young. You look at a guy like Jalen Armour Davis. He got tested against Florida. We talked about him. We talked about Florida earlier in the segment. I think they went after him like 4 times. They got a completion. He got a pick. He got an interception in the last game. He's really come along. Kool-Aid McKinstry is a real dynamic guy, but again, a freshman. Brian Branch played some safety for a while. They're just not. They don't have those NFL type caliber guys that we're used to seeing back there. That's not to say they won't wind up being there at some point. They're just incredibly young, Matt. Josh Jobe was targeted like 9 times against Mississippi State, got 4 completions. So if that front 7 can't get a pressure, and look, they've had some difficulty getting the quarterbacks with just a 4-man front, right? They've had to bring a 5th guy and bring pressure. If they can't do that, and you leave those cornerbacks out there too long, they're susceptible to big plays.
A Couple more minutes here with Mark Heim. You mentioned the front seven. We know about the pass rush, but what about the rest of that defensive front seven? Where are they good? Where are they weak?
Yeah, so I think people love Henry To'oTo'o, the kid from Tennessee. Christian Harris played in there, and those linebackers are incredibly athletic. But again, how much of a grasp do they have? Do they have that kind of middle linebacker leader calling out all the signals and making sure everybody's on the right page? Clearly, in the last couple games, specifically against Tennessee, they looked confused. They weren't in the right sets. They gave up big plays. With that said, it's still a very good defense. I think they're good. They're not great. I don't know if they're championship caliber without the explosiveness that you have on this offense. What I'm saying is, if that offense is struggling, could this defense continue to get them win after win after win? The answer is probably not, but the schedule lines up here in the next few weeks that it's certainly doable.
Mark, before you go, special teams, kicking game, Nick and them kickers are always a storyline, man. How are they in special teams this year?
Yeah, the last couple of seasons, we've actually we haven't had a chance to really nitpick on the old special teams. Kicking-wise, I think they've actually been pretty solid. There was a stint there during Nick Saban's tenure where people were asking, he's getting these 5-star recruits, why can't he recruit a kicker? Over the last couple of years, they've been pretty solid in special teams. But anytime they're kicking a field goal, it's considered a failure by Alabama fans, and there's always that sense of kind of holding your breath. But overall, with the exception of giving up the special teams touchdown against Texas A&M, the special teams has been solid. Nick Saban's always believed in playing some of his better players on special teams. He continues to do that. And so, look, as much as you and I would like for this game this Saturday to be a storyline, I mean, the fact that CBS didn't carry this for the first time in umpteen years tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. I was going to ask, I was going to ask Mark, if there is a blueprint for LSU to pull an upset, what is it? But it feels like your answer might be, the plague or something like that, hitting Alabama. I don't know.
Look, I mean, that LSU locker room better than I do. I mean, if they come out and just say,
that's the problem.
Let's just go play, and they just let it all loose and go. I just don't know how long you can continue that week after week after week, knowing that you got a lame duck at coach.
Yep.
I wish I had something more for you, Matt. It just I'd be making something up, man.
I know. I feel the same way. I felt the same way all week, Mark. It's Thursday. This is the most detail we've gone into this LSU-Alabama game in now the fourth day of this week. So it tells you where things are.
With you. It's pretty much it's been pretty similar on our show, to be honest with you, over here in Alabama. We haven't spent a whole lot of time on it.
Who dat?
Exactly.
Mark Heim from WNSP Radio and AL.com. Always appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for a couple of minutes, man.
Hey, man. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks.
All right. We'll see you, buddy.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.